There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
I am really excited to welcome for her first appearance, hopefully not her last on my channel, the Calgary, Alberta writer, Barb Howard. Welcome, Barb.
Hi, Shawn. Happy to be here.
So I read Barb's most recent novel or novella. It was published in 2021, and here is my library copy. I'll be getting my own personal copy as soon as I can afford to do so. But I read this from the library just a few weeks ago, and I loved it so much. And it was the kind of story that I typically don't go for, that it just kind of opened up a whole bunch of stuff in me about who I am as a reader and what kind of literature I enjoy. And so with all that stuff going on inside me, I contacted Barb out of the blue and invited her to come on. And so here we are. And I think did you want to say something about the library?
I did. Well, there were so many things already I wanted to say something.
Oh, please. Then I'm just going to stop talking and let you talk.
You said library and literature. I like that word, referring to this book that's like a beach read as well. But yes, the library, I just love that you saw it in a library and picked it up. And maybe we're going to talk about what I'm reading later, but just reading on whim, and that it wasn't sent to you from a publicist or those things. That's a thrill as a writer that's you picked the book up that way.
Well, it was thrilling for me too. That is kind of, I've only recently started using the library, having lived outside of the country, out of the kind of the Western speaking world, English speaking world for more than a decade. But I hadn't been a library user. As you can see, I'm a book acquirer. But I've started using the library, and I was looking for short books because I lost a lot of valuable reading time this year because I was so busy getting moved from Tokyo back to Canada. And so I decided I'm going to focus on short books, and that's how I saw yours with this lovely blue spine, and the rest is history.
It's a novella, and I don't know if it's short, and authors usually don't have much to do with the cover, but the cover is a play. I don't know if any of your listeners or viewers would remember Jaws, the old Jaws paper book. It's a play on that coming up.
Oh, I didn't think of that. We'll be
like it's probably maybe too subtle, but I just I've heard that a lot of books are just picked up based on cover, and so shortness and cover.
I'm curious if this is lingo that you've heard, but it's certainly prevalent in the booktube universe. A cover buy.
Mm-hmm.
So you buy it based on the cover. So, Barb, tell us about this book. Tell us what's the opening premise.
The opening premise is there's the main character written in first person. Her name is Ginny. She is going to the Okanagan for a holiday on a working vacation. And the very original premise for me was that if I had this working massage therapist, she'd get to touch a lot of characters in ways that maybe characters generally can't or shouldn't. So that was fun. She's with her family. Everybody has a little issue, as they do on family vacations. It's at a small Okanagan resort. And my underlying ideas in writing it is vacations. I wonder about them all the time. Were they fun? Why are we taking them? Nostalgia, because we almost always make them into fun. And then this nostalgia blocks us maybe from having the fun at the current one, if that's what you're there on vacation for, or family bonding.
That's very interesting. Maybe I missed some cues about the setting in time. Is it set in the present, or is it set a little bit back?
A little bit back, but mainly because it took me so long to write it. But
so not that far back, but a few years back.
Decade. Short book, but I'm a slow writer. In terms of nostalgia, I was thinking more of the main character. They go every year on the same vacation. Many of us have done that sort of thing, but why are we doing that? And is it enjoyable? We talked about not doing spoilers. So yeah, I'm interested in that. And then also interested in the beach scene, the buff guy, people's bodies being more on display. And I finished this in the pandemic, so I mainly wanted to make people laugh.
Well, it very much did. I had a perpetual smile on my face from beginning to end. So it was a delight and very, very funny. I love what you just said about the fact that Ginny, I'm pronouncing it right, Ginny?
Mhm.
Ginny, the protagonist, she's a massage therapist, and I knew that. I picked that much up, but I didn't think about the fact that she having a connection to the people's everybody's bodies in a way that nobody else was. That's something I'd like to think about a little more. Do you have any more to say about that?
So at the resort, there's people who massages every year when she goes there. It's the same returning crew, and then there's one new person there, Uber athlete. His name is Dwayne Champion. I
Say no more.
play freely with the stereotypes. I thought, why am I avoiding these so hard? This is the beach, is stereotypes. That's who's there, superficially. But then there's people who don't hire her for a massage either. And she is also a diagnoser of people in her spare time, just looking at them, diagnosing. I don't know if massage therapists do that. I think they might, but I'm fascinated with the profession of massage therapy, and of course got to have some massages as research.
Great. Did you give any?
No, and that's what
Didn't get to massage any beach hunks as research. I would have loved to help you with that.
Maybe I need to write a sequel.
Well, that's
with
right.
more research.
So the protagonist, Ginny, her character is fascinating. She is, well, I'm going to tell you what I thought of her, and you tell me if I'm off the mark. But she struck me. She was hilarious. She saw the humor or the irony, and she definitely had a sarcastic nuance to her observations about the people around her. But she made humor kind of at the expense of her own happiness. Like I think she was almost borderline depressed. I don't know. I kind of hesitate to introduce that word into the conversation, but that's how she struck me. And her relationship with her entire family seems to be a bit of a train wreck, but she doesn't seem to realize how bad it is. So that is another dimension of the humor. But I really worried is not the right word, but I was just fascinated by her through the entire novel because she just had this perspective that was quite witty and quite, but sarcastic and self-justifying. But she was a piece of work.
Yeah. So, it's so interesting that you used the D word, depressed. I'm not a psychologist. I wouldn't say that, but I would say that she's, even though it's a funny book, I hope, but humor, as they say, is always the underside is there as well, about some sadness. Yeah, I don't peg her as a happy person. She's very judgmental and funny and correct on, I think as people often are.
She has strong likes and dislikes among the other members of this once a year, 1 week long community.
But she's not saying anything out loud. She's thinking it all. And I like that idea. What are people really thinking? She drinks. As an author, I intended her to have a drinking problem. I have received different views on that part of her. I've heard people say, oh, she's holiday drinking. And I was thinking, I think I intended her to be a drinker. So I think it's where your drinking bar is, whether you think she's a problematic drinker enough. I did receive more than one comment from people that I don't know on the book with some advice for, say, AA or something like that. And then that was a whole new circle for me, thinking, do they think she's me? I hope I'm a nicer person, actually, without that.
Well, I can already tell you are, although I wouldn't mind spending an hour talking to her either.
Yeah.
Because I thought that was actually one of the things I appreciated the most about the book was the way that you handled her drinking. You didn't problematize it. It was there, and the reader could draw their own conclusions. But I love the fact that you didn't push a conclusion on us. I thought it's one of the best depictions of somebody who drinks a lot that I've read in a long time, if ever. So I thought that was one of the strengths of the book, was the way that you showed that. And I'm speaking as a person who likes his drink. So
Yeah. Well, me too.
when you create a story like this that is so rich and has so many facets to it, then you get that multifaceted, that array of reactions. So that's really interesting to hear.
I've written two novellas, and I'm working on right now. And the first one was I don't know what the word, being an eccentric man. So and I felt like that's all people could take of him was a novella, which was even shorter than this one. And I felt a bit the same about this one, like how much of her judgment and not recognizing, taking too long or whatever to recognize her, maybe some of her own issues. How much of that does a person want to read? Is that it doesn't feel like entertainment, I feel, after a certain number of pages.
Well, that's interesting. We're not going to get into how the book ends, but I think it's fair to say that there is some development of her character, or there's a pointing towards that there is, I'm not sure if growth is the right word, but that there's some momentum towards, she's got a deeper perspective on a lot of the people around her by the end. And so I liked that. And I also liked that it ended where it did, because maybe you're right. Would we want to read how she becomes less, loses her edge and becomes less judgmental? I don't know if we'd want to continue to read as she becomes a maybe happier, more boring person.
Yeah, and just she's diagnosing and judging people, including she's diagnosing her husband as depressed, which is intended to be ironic. Yeah, that kind of person, even if it's in their head, maybe it's too, if they were speaking aloud, definitely 1 week is enough time. That's how long the book is set in 7 days, a 7-day vacation.
I have about 1 million questions to come out of what you've just been talking about, but maybe I'd like to start with how did her character come to you? You can talk about how she is or isn't like you. That isn't really what I mean, but just how did she, such a full-bodied character, how did she come together in your writerly brain and heart?
She started out as the book started out as not a funny story initially, and that's why it took so long to write. I had a different plan going, and I wanted to write an important book, and of course then you have to have all these important things happening, and it was just more a book about the characters around her, and I thought it was more interesting what's going on about her. And I know there's lots of stories about mothers, and I'm a mother, and I do have 2 kids, not 2 kids like this, and I don't have a daughter. If I'm in the book, I'm probably the little girl, the competitive little girl who I added. Sometimes people ask that, and I thought, if somebody asked me that, who am I? I'm probably that. That's it. I don't do character sketches. I don't do anything like that. I just put the character through events and actions, and I see how the story flows, and then I don't believe they tell me, but they kind of grow that way.
Yeah.
What would this person do in this? And she is difficult because she doesn't speak. I think she even makes a point in the book of saying she admires one character who just says what they think.
Yeah.
And I would say that I have that trait as well. I don't know that it's the best course. Sometimes it is. I don't know that it's always the best course, but I admire people who just say that and don't carry anything on their shoulders the rest of the day.
Well, I loved her, but she is, in my esteem, she is coming in second after Dot and Ruth Ann, who live in the cabin next door. Tell us about them. I'd love them so much.
Well, in early drafts, they were sisters.
Oh.
And I thought, when you write something, and I thought, oh, come on, Barb. They're not sisters. They're sisters, sisters from another generation, maybe. So they have a romantic relationship. One is they're octogenarians. They are.
I wasn't exactly sure. I knew they were elderly, but were they in their 80s? Yep.
Yeah. And they know how to have a relationship. They know how to have fun. They know how to have a party. They know how to dress up in a kooky outfit for the bonfire. And yes, I admire them and their way of being. And they are based on, I went on a sea kayaking trip once and in Belize, and there's a group of 4 women who were 80. And so when the group's getting together, I was quite young then, and everybody's like, whoa, 4 80-year-olds. They were superstars at everything. That, you know, one in particular was just kind of a life changer for me. They brought all good things with them. So I'm interested in that. And of course, you know, here I'm interested in ageism and making sure that I don't necessarily have an agenda for it, but I'm interested if you can have characters having loving, great relationships. That's important in all ages.
They had a very loving relationship, very open. They were more open as sexual beings than anybody else in the novel. And I have already spoiled this on an earlier video on my channel, so I'm going to do it again because it's it's probably my favorite moment in the book is when Ginny I can't remember why she has to go over to their cabin, drop something off or pick something up, and she knows them really well. So she just walks in and says, hello, hello. And they're in the shower together. And one of them peeks their head out the door and said, what are you doing? Get out of here. We're busy.
And she has a wistful moment of,
yeah,
you know, given what's going on in her house, which I don't think is particularly horrible. I think it's kind of, you know, some general family stuff.
Sure, but it isn't there. She's not having showers with her life partner.
No.
That was fantastic.
Vacation napper.
I can't believe I'm about to ask you this, but I'm going to request that there be a sequel with them, Dot and Ruth Ann, as the protagonists. That's how much I love them.
Oh, that's nice. It gives me something to think about writing. Yeah.
Well, they really have stayed with me. Is that enough to say about this novel? Have we teased the viewers enough? I certainly recommend this novel very heartily. I'd like to move on and hear about some of your other writings, Barb, because I'm not familiar at all with what else you've done, but I know you've done quite a bit. You have several books out. As far as I'm aware, and from what you've said so far in this chat, you prefer writing shorter, like novella length books. So tell me more about that and tell us about some of your other novellas.
Yeah. You have a writing class, and there's the person who writes the page, and there's the person who writes 20 pages in the free fall writing bit. I'm the one pagers. I write short, and some people write long, and probably what I'm best at is short stories. But every once in a while, something I feel needs to, you know, has more to say. This Happy Sands actually grew out of a short story that I felt was a little bit unsuccessful. I liked the aspects. Dot and Ruth Ann were in it. I wanted to keep them. Ginny, the main character, was in it. So that for me was the novel was growing a book. I don't usually operate like that. Novellas, yeah, there's all these amazing books that are novellas. I don't know why they're not, with people supposedly shortening attention spans. I don't know why they're not just a huge, well, I do know why. It's economies of scale. They're expensive to print and then pay the same amount for a little book. But, you know, what Jonathan Livingston Seagull and The Christmas Carol and The Old Man and the Sea, there's these classics that are novellas, and I love that form. I love reading it. Maybe because I'm also a little bit of a slow reader, but I don't know why they're not all over. They're very hard to get published, and Happy Sands was published by the University of Calgary Press. It has a Brave and Brilliant series that will publish novellas. So there's a couple in that series, and otherwise, I don't know. I don't know who's putting them out. But don't you think they should be right now the thing?
Well, I do, and I love reading novellas, and some of my favorite books are novellas. Some of my favorite works of fiction are novellas. I know there's a lot of readers out there that don't, although I haven't specifically heard them utter this criticism in relation to novellas, but certainly in relation to short stories, that they're too short. These type of reader always says, I want more. I want more. It's not too short. So that's not me. I love short stories and I love novellas, but I think it is almost a majority opinion among readers of literary fiction anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And people, you just gravitate to, you should be gravitating to what you like, not what you feel you should read anyway.
Absolutely.
So, I would say novella maybe is a happy medium for everybody. I think
Sure.
that, but the short stories, I think maybe sometimes you get a collection. Talk about books that I have. Other than Happy Sands, what I'm most proud of is a short story collection that I wrote, and I feel like
2012 Western Taxidermy. Yes.
Taxidermy, when it's from a title story that's referring more to cosmetic work, having work done, but there's actual taxidermist in it. But I felt like people maybe were reading it, pick it up and read it front to back. And I don't know how you read a short story collection, but I think you just.
And I do read it from front to back. I tend to read them in sequential in the order that they're published, but I often will put the book down for a month in between, so I read it very slowly, in and amongst a bunch of other things.
Well, a lot of thought goes into the order, assuming
Yes.
people are reading it like that. But I tend to just sort of flip through, or now I feel like this, and of other collections. But I would agree. I think short story is I encounter readers resistant to just reading a short story, and I get it.
Different strokes for different folks, I guess.
I wrote a first novel, Whipstock, and I love to write some magic realism. On my website, I have a story that's got legs, as they say right now, about Bigfoot. And Whipstock was a woman who was impregnated by a oil derrick. So if you don't like that kind of conceit going on, then that's not the book for you, but it's still in print. It was 20 years
Interesting.
ago.
Now, just so I'm clear, an oil derrick, isn't that big thing that bobs on the top of the sea pulls the oil up? I'm so stupid about this kind of stuff, right? And she gets impregnated by that. Okay.
Yeah, or on the prairie, but it's that thing where you, rather than get around to some magic moment, you just start off with Bigfoot in the story, or start off with this long pregnancy and have fun, but maybe there's a comment in there on some other things, such as at the time I had worked in the oil patch, so women in the oil patch. Yeah. And for that book, there was a lot of me coming to realize all the terms like the mother lode and things like this in the oil industry. Like, it's just this really interesting thing going on with these. I don't say bad, they're very descriptive terms
that are gendered.
Yeah.
See, I know almost nothing about the oil industry, other than that I don't want to be anywhere near it, but so interesting.
Yeah.
So you started with a novel then, is that right? Your first book was a novel.
My first book was a novel, but I wrote short stories before then, and and that is what I'm doing now too. I write short stories and send them to magazines, and nobody reads them. And when my mother was alive, she did. And then I gathered them together for a collection. The publishers like to see, usually, that you have, maybe a third of the group or something has been published, sort of vetted, or by someone else.
Sure. So you've had one short story collection published?
Yeah.
And one novel?
So 3, the young adult one,
the
one, and then Happy Sands. Yeah. Oh, and then the other novella, Notes for Monday. And that at the time I thought, wow, I'm proud of that. Really proud of that book. It's with a publisher that has since disappeared. So that's why I wasn't mentioning it. So it's hard to, it's still, I think there's still e-copies around. I think every author who's been around for a while has had some sort of experience like that. I don't know where the copies are. But.
You have talked about your first novel quite proudly is not the word. I don't mean to put that nuance on it at all, but just that you're not saying anything bad about it, but you've also said that you prefer to write shorter stuff. So how have you evolved as a writer in terms of the length of what you write? Because it doesn't sound like you're interested in or want to write novels now. Have I got that right?
Well, I might. since I just finished this novella, I usually finish and say I'll never do it again. And then do it again. And the short stories I love. I can work on them in all sorts of situations. In my car when I'm waiting for something, or I can think of a little bit, and it's less onerous in some ways, but they're more onerous to get. They're harder to get right. So my short stories are getting longer. Just for a project that I'm on for Energy Futures thing, I wrote a short story, and it's the longest short story I have ever written at 4,000 words. That's not much for some writers, but I'm getting wordier or getting more descriptive, and the novellas got longer as well. So maybe
a novel will be born that way.
maybe the big epic isn't in. I look at some people's books and think that book is bigger than probably my publications will be for my life. You know, when you see some of the really big
door stoppers.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like I'm envisioning the future where you're going to be writing prose poems that end up becoming short stories, and short stories that end up actually becoming novellas, and novellas which end up becoming novels, and then novels which end up becoming a serial. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the ticket. If I could write a trilogy.
Now, you are incredibly connected and doing all kinds of wonderful stuff in terms of teaching creative writing, and really involved in the writing community in Alberta, and I think across Western Canada. There's one in particular I'd like to ask you about because I hadn't heard of it. It sounds really interesting. The Shoe Project. Please tell me about the Shoe Project.
Oh, I will. So the Shoe Project is started in Toronto. It's in its 12th year, and it is workshop and performance coaching for immigrant women. So I'm on the board now, but I started out as a writing mentor in Calgary and across certain cities in Calgary or in Canada. There's a writing mentor chosen, and then usually an actor. Here in Calgary, it's Denise Clark with One Yellow Rabbit, who was a superstar. I work with 12 immigrant refugee refugee women who are just come to Calgary and have a story to tell. And we work on a 600-word story. It takes months and months. And then Denise works with performance skills, and we have an event. And then the amazing thing about it is all the stories are told through the lens of a pair of shoes. So the very first shoe project was held Bata Shoe Museum in Toronto offered the space, and they said, sure, can you include some shoes? Anyhow, it has become this just amazing kind of metaphor for everything. Somehow it works. Every workshop, the women are telling a story about an actual pair of shoes that they have. Sometimes we have to find them because they've lost them in their journey to Canada, but sometimes they still have them, or they've got them here. Just a significant way to tell a story. And I love it. I love all the experiences and just everything about it. A way for me to just learn so much. And then hopefully I'm helping them with their writing skills. And it's varying skills in English. Some people are already writers, and then some are learning English, and we all work together and have lots of treats and cry things. It's beautiful if you're in a city with one on. One happening just right now, I think, is in Brampton. Yes, or if anybody listening is interested, contact me.
Wonderful. This has been a delight to chat with you, and thank you for bringing Happy Sands into the world. I'm looking forward to checking out more of your writing. I would love to have you come back on repeatedly.
I'd love to come back on. Thanks for the opportunity, Shawn, just to chat about me. Who doesn't like that?
Well, we'll do it again very soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Shawn.